Hello, 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 everybody. It's Caven. You know, until I can get an opportunity to do some acting, because game show hosting is not, well, it's acting, but it's not the, it's not, it's a different kind of acting. I'm going to continue to work on the stuff that I had been working on back in California, which was reading from The Great Gatsby. I just want to keep doing. I want to finish this book. So I've got all the way to page 67, so I'm going to read from 67 for a few more pages, and just going to keep going every day, hopefully, or every other day, to try to get my read on, and also to read scripts and to read, just to work on my stuff, because I know that once you get to a certain point, you just need to keep working at getting better, or I think you lose it. Snooze, you lose, use it or lose it, one of those good old terms. Alright, so we're going to start on page 67 of The Great Gatsby. Nick Carraway right now, where I left off, Nick Carraway was talking about the guests that visit Jay Gatsby's house in the summer at some of his outrageous parties that he has at his home. When I left off, I was reading a list of people who come to Jay Gatsby's mansion to party. People who are known celebrities during Nick Carraway's day. So we're going to finish that list up and see what else has to offer. The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, page 67. A man named Klipspringer was there so often and so long that he became known as the Boarder. I doubt if he had any other home. Of theatrical people, there were Gus Ways and Horace O'Donovan and Lester Meyer, George Duckweed, and Francis Bull. Also from New York were the Cromes and the Beckheisens and the Denekers and Russell Betty and the Corrigans and the Kelleher's and the Dewars and the Scullys and S.W. Belcher and the Smirks and the Young Quinns, divorced now, and Henry L. Palmetto, who killed himself by jumping in front of a subway train in Times Square. Benny McClanahan arrived always with 4 girls. They were never quite the same ones in physical person, but they were so identical one with another that it inevitably seemed they had been there before. I've forgotten their names. Jacqueline, I think, or else Consuela, or Gloria, or Judy, or June, and their last names were either the melodious names of flowers and months, or the sterner ones of the great American capitalists whose cousins, if pressed, they would confess themselves to be. In addition to all these, I can remember that Faustina O'Brien came there at least once, and the Bedecker girls, and young Brewer, who had his nose shot off in the war, and Mr. Albruchsberger, and Miss Hogg, his fiancée, and Ardita Fitzpeters, and Mr. P. Jewett, who once head of the American Legion, and Miss Claudia Hip, with a man reputed to be her chauffeur, and a prince of something whom we call Duke, and whose name, if I ever knew it, I've forgotten. All these people came to Gatsby's house in the summer. At 9 o'clock one morning, late in July, Gatsby's gorgeous car lurched up from the rocky drive to my door and gave out a burst of melody from its 3-noted horn. It was the first time he had called on me, though. I had gone to 2 of his parties, mounted in his hydroplane, and at his urgent invitation, made frequent use of his beach. "Good morning, old sport. You're having lunch with me today, and I thought we'd ride up together." He was balancing himself on the dashboard of his car with that resourcefulness of movement that is so peculiarly American. That comes, I suppose, with the absence of lifting work or rigid sitting in youth, and even more with the formless grace of our nervous, sporadic games. This quality was continually breaking through his punctilious manner in the shape of restlessness. He was never quite still. There was always a tapping foot somewhere or the impatient opening and closing of a hand. He saw me looking with admiration at his car. "It's pretty, isn't it, old sport?" He jumped off to give me a better view. "Haven't you seen it before?" I'd seen it. Everybody had seen it. was a rich cream color, bright with nickel, swollen here and there in its monstrous length, with triumphant hat boxes and supper boxes and tool boxes, and terraced with a labyrinth of windshields that mirrored a dozen suns. Sitting down behind many layers of glass in a sort of green leather conservatory, we started to town. I had talked with him perhaps half a dozen times in the past month and found to my disappointment that he had little to say. So my first impression that he was a person of some undefined consequence had gradually faded, and he had become simply the proprietor of an elaborate roadhouse next door. And then came that disconcerting ride. We hadn't reached West Egg Village before Gatsby began leaving his elegant sentences unfinished and slapping himself indecisively on the knee of his caramel-colored suit. "Look here, old sport," he broke out surprisingly. "What's your opinion of me, anyhow?" A little overwhelmed, I began the generalized evasion which that question deserves. "Well, I'm going to tell you something about my life," he interrupted. "I don't want you to get the wrong idea of me from all these stories you hear." So he was aware of the bizarre accusations that flavored conversations in his home. "I'll tell you the God's truth." His right hand suddenly ordered divine retribution to stand by. "I am the son of some wealthy people in the Middle West, all dead now. I was brought up in America but educated at Oxford because all my ancestors have been educated there for many years. It's a family tradition." He looked at me sideways, and I knew why Jordan Baker had believed he was lying. He hurried the phrase "educated at Oxford," or swallowed it, or choked on it as though it had bothered him before. And with this doubt, his whole statement fell to pieces, and I wondered if there wasn't something a little sinister about him after all. "What part of the Middle West?" I inquired casually. "San Francisco." "I see. My family all died, and I came into a good deal of money." His voice was solemn, as if the memory of that sudden extinction of a clan still haunted him. For a moment I suspected he was pulling my leg, but a glance at him convinced me otherwise. "After that, I lived like a young Raja in all the capitals of Europe, Paris, Venice, Rome, collecting jewels, chiefly rubies, hunting big game, painting a little, things for myself only, and trying to forget something very sad that had happened to me long ago." With an effort, I managed to restrain my incredulous laughter. The very phrases were worn so threadbare that they evoked no image except of a turbaned character leaking sawdust at every pore as he pursued the tiger through the Bouge de Boulogne. Then came the war, old sport. It was a great relief, and I tried very hard to die, but I seemed to bear an enchanted life. I accepted a commission as first lieutenant when it began. In the Argonne Forest, I took 2 machine gun detachments so far forward that there was half-a-mile gap on either side of us, where the infantry couldn't advance. We stayed there 2 days and 2 nights, 130 men with 16 Lewis guns. And when the infantry came up at last, they found the insignia of 3 German divisions amongst the piles of the dead. I was promoted to be a major, and every Allied government gave me a decoration. Even Montenegro. Little Montenegro down on the Adriatic Sea. Little Montenegro. He lifted up the words and nodded at them with his smile. The smile comprehended Montenegro's troubled history and sympathized with the brave struggles of the Montenegrin people. It appreciated fully the chain of national circumstances which had elicited this tribute from Montenegro's warm little heart. My incredulity was submerged in fascination now. It was like skimming hastily through a dozen magazines. He reached in his pocket, and a piece of metal slung on a ribbon fell into my palm. "That's the one from Montenegro." To my astonishment, the thing had an authentic look. "Orderi di Danilo," ran the circular legend, "Montenegro Nicholas Rex." Turn it. "Major J. Gatsby," I read, "for valor extraordinary." Here's another thing I always carry, a souvenir of Oxford days. It was taken in Trinity Quad. The man on my left is now Earl of Doncaster. It was a photograph of half a dozen young men in blazers loafing in an archway through which were visible a host of spires. There was Gatsby, looking a little, not much younger, with a cricket bat in his hand. Then it was all true. I saw the skins of tigers flaming in his palace on the Grand Canal. I saw him opening a chest of rubies to ease with their crimson-lighted depths the gnawing of his broken heart. "I'm going to make a big request of you today," he said, pocketing his souvenirs with satisfaction, "so I thought you ought to know something about me. I didn't want you to think I was just some nobody. You see, I usually find myself among strangers because I drift here and there trying to forget the sad things that happened to me.